Welcome to Eventful Insights, the show where we give new entrepreneurs the expert advice and insider tips they need to grow their skills and make an impact in the event planning industry. I'm Melissa Cossette, founder of Max Event and the Max Event Business Builder. Today I'm talking with Charlene DeLuca, a wedding planning expert and owner of Just a Girl Events. Charlene specializes in luxe weddings and destination experiences, working with couples from Boston to Newport, Rhode Island to create flawless high-end celebrations. She's here to share her top pro insights on what newcomers need to know and do to stand out in a competitive world of event planning. So if planning is your passion and you're ready to learn what it takes to level up in this industry, you're in the right place. From collaborating with top-tier vendors to managing client expectations, Charlene is bringing the practical advice you need to elevate your planning skills and take your business to the next level. Charlene, I am so excited to have you here today for this conversation.
Thank you. I'm excited as well.
So let's talk about understanding event planning as a career. And this is something that we are going to talk about first and foremost because there are so many women out there, men too, but a lot of women who think, I wonder if I could be a professional event planner. I've planned my wedding. I've planned a few parties. Maybe this is something I can make money from. So why don't you tell us a little bit about how you think a new planner is going to determine the right focus or area of event planning for them to get involved with?
So the first thing I would like to mention is for those who have planned a party, a personal party, that's not what we do. There's so much more that is entailed in planning. And there's a lot of different avenues to go to. You may want a full plan. You may want a partial plan. You may want to do day of coordination. But what I always suggest for planners is to start thinking about what things do you like. What type of events do you like? Do you like social events? Do you like weddings? Do you like small intimate affairs? And once you think about that, then I would suggest you go into actual planning for those events, but not try to cut the corners and go right to partial planning or, coordination, because you cannot understand the backbone of planning with those two pieces. And without the backbone of planning, you can't succeed in partial planning or coordination.
Right. So let's break this down a little bit. What you're essentially saying is that in order to be a successful, say, day of coordinator or partial planner, somebody would first need to understand all of the intricacies and nuts and bolts behind planning from soup to nuts, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And then that way, once they understand that more fully, they could sort of jump into the process in a way that allows them to take hold of part of the process while still understanding everything that's been done so far. So that makes perfect sense to me. So how would you suggest that somebody, if they're thinking, well, I really want to plan weddings, so how do I go about just becoming a full wedding planner? I'm brand new. Who's going to hire me for that?
My first thought is you don't just jump into it by yourself. There's a bunch of industry experts. I always suggest that a full-time planner works in a venue such as a country club, an off-site caterer, or a hotel. And you work in the banquet facility for those venues. It gives a huge understanding of how the business runs. And you get to see from the one side of it everything that is involved in the biggest piece when you're an actual planner, which is, your venue and your food. But at that point, you're also now dealing with the other vendors that are coming in and participating in this event. So you get to work with them, you get to see how they work, and there's no pressure to you to spearhead the process. Right. So you get a great behind the scenes, and you can understand the mechanics a lot better if you are on the other side before you start to take the helm and, try to take control of full planning.
Yeah, that's so important. And we're going to talk a little bit more about working with vendors as we go. But one thing I love what you talked about here is that you can sort of absorb the process of an event sort of looking in and watching the wheels in motion. And it's a great opportunity to also, make note of the things that you don't quite understand. And it's not really an opportunity to say, hey, can we do this differently? It's more of an opportunity to say, I wonder why they did it that way, and then get more knowledge and information. And then, of course, once you do, you can always come back later and be like, I think that if I were planning that event, I would have done this, and go forward with, those aspirations. So what type of factors would people consider when they're thinking about what type of events they want to plan? Like, let's put wedding planning aside for a second. Say somebody doesn't want to go right into weddings because they feel like, wow, I don't want to chance risking somebody's big day, but I'll start by planning full other kinds of events. Do you have any recommendations on where people might be able to start with an event that's a little bit lower of a stress level?
So hotels are great resources because hotels host a bevy of events. They'll host graduations, they'll host celebrations, they'll host retirement parties, they host a big array of events as opposed to just weddings. So it gives you a good insight, and it's kind of like putting your toes in the water.
Got you. So you're saying if you're going to try to get maybe a side gig doing that, look in hotels. And I think that's a really great suggestion, because you'll see everything from weddings to corporate meetings. And you can really decide which of these things is resonating with me. Where are my passions lying? Because we don't do this just to have like another 9 to 5, right? We're doing it to figure out where our passions are and how we want to help people with their experiences.
And I can say from experience that when I worked in hotels, I absolutely knew that I did not want to do corporate meetings. It was very cookie cutter, but it helped me to understand what I didn't want to do. Maybe not always what I did want to do, but it definitely took out the things that I didn't want to do.
Yeah, and that's right there, you're like, that's half the battle, is knowing what you don't want. So the other stuff you can do a little trial and error and see what works as you're going forward. Okay, so what do you think are some common challenges very new event planners face when they're getting their business going? And what are some of your tips for overcoming those challenges?
So I think once you're on your own, the biggest challenge is getting your clientele. Where are you going to find people? Who's going to trust you? You haven't done this before. They don't know who you are. Your name is not out there. So where is your business coming from? And I'm going to revert back to being in a different industry, the hotels, not a different industry, but a different sector. You'll make contacts. So now you're making contacts if you're at a hotel or a country club. You're going to make contacts with all of the vendors. So the photographers, the caterers, the cakes. You're just going to make these contacts. And those are the people that will help refer you. You're also going to make contact with clients who now may have an event that's not in the hotel. So that, I think, is a really big factor, making contacts there. And then, I think ask some family. Ask some friends. If you do have industry peers, ask them to tag along. Let me come with you. Let me see what's going on. Let me get my name out there. Let me help you. Join trade groups. So, like kind, be where there are planners, be where there are industry, professionals. And, I'm old school, so the social media is really tough for me. But what I've noticed is the first question I get from a bride is, what's your Insta? And I'm like, what? Insta what? Instamatic? I'm thinking camera? No. Oh, Instagram, right? So social media is huge. Every bride I know that I have is on there scouring for whatever vendor she's looking for. And, so a big thing is get that social media going. Even if you have nothing to put on it, put on tips, put on, talk about yourself, talk about your company, just review other people's work. Show a different photographer what they're doing. But social media, I think, is important. Again, old school, we're still a handshake, we're still referral. That's a lot for us, but I think the new wave coming in is that social media.
Yeah, let me talk a few minutes about this too, because when I work with people in the Business Builder program, one of the things I tell them is that you're going to be hard pressed to be a brand new planner in this industry and then get a following on social media, or don't bother with ads. Like, that's money you're paying out there, and you will get little traction that way. The reason being, when people go to look at your Insta, they're looking for your credibility and social proof. And it's understandable that a newbie hasn't built that yet.
Right.
So in the meantime, you just have to be a little bit more creative with how you're using the platform, just like you said. So if you don't have a following, do some collaborations with some other industry pros who do, and find out, like, how can we support each other? Go to the networking events that you mentioned, industry events, and when you're there, make it clear. Don't try to pretend you're something other than you are. Go in there and say, I'm new and I'm trying to get the lay of the land, and you know what, I'm looking for somebody who's willing to give some time and show me the ropes. And these people might just very well find somebody that's there. But I think the biggest thing to take away from this whole question is relationships are gold in the event industry.
Very important.
There's nothing that replaces it when it comes to lead generation, client acquisition, referrals, all of that. It all starts with relationships, which is obvious because events is a relationship.
Yes, it is.
Driven
There's
business.
a bunch of team. There's a new thing they're doing too, style shoots.
Yes.
So there's a lot of style shoots going on, and if you haven't done an event, well, have a style shoot.
Yeah.
Grab yourself 4 or 5 vendors, go out, record it, set it up, like go through the whole mock process, and do a style shoot.
Yeah, for those that don't know what a styled shoot is, what it is essentially it's a mock, say, wedding scene that is decorated to look like the head table or a ballroom or something like that, and then there's perhaps a floral designer, a photographer, a caterer, a planner, a few folks that are heavily involved in bringing, say, a wedding to life, and then the photographer is getting pictures so that those can be used by all the vendors who are taking part.
And that's the most important part.
Yeah.
That photographer is going to be your best friend.
Yes.
Because they make it look good.
Yes.
How do you make a bouquet on a table look good, right? It's just a bouquet.
Right. Have you ever tried to take pictures of those bouquets on the table?
Yeah,
they never come out like the photographer does.
No, I've been forbidden. All the photographers that work with me tell me, Charl, just we'll do it. You just do what you do best. We'll take those. So they are your best friends for when you're going to put things up online.
Yep.
And when you said about advertising, I've been doing this for over 30 years, and honestly, I took out my first ad last year. So 29 years, I never took out an ad.
Yeah.
29 years. And I went on my first wedding, Zola.com. I went on Zola and advertised there too. But prior to that, I had never done it.
Yeah. Because I still assert that you don't need to. If you know how to make relationships, you can get business in this industry without putting 1 cent into advertising. Right. So, but all that being said, the world is changing, social media, all of that is always evolving. So, there's just, there's on one side of the spectrum, it's keeping an eye to the trends and what's going on. Yep. And then the bedrock is to make sure that relationships are always at the base of it. So let's we already started talking about learning and gaining experience in, event planning. So what I always kind of chuckle a little at is when somebody says, they're a master event planner, but they've been in this business for, 9 months or something like that. And you can take all of the certification courses in the world that's available online, but you are still not a master wedding planner after 9 months of being in the business. Right. And the simple reason is just because there's so much to know. There's so much that doesn't come across one's plate, so to speak, unless it's actually happening. You can't fabricate so many of the learning experiences. They just happen, they happen organically. So I talked, we talked earlier about how somebody could get a job at, say, a catering company or a hotel or something like that. What do you think is, another way that somebody could perhaps like speed up their education or learning process when somebody is very motivated to want to kind of like you really dive into this industry, other than the things we've discussed? Is there any other tidbits that you can offer?
Honestly, the biggest takeaway, I'll keep going back to it, is working under someone else.
Yeah.
Working with somebody who knows what they're doing, and making the vendors your friends. If you don't know, when we're creating like timelines, right? We have to create a timeline as a planner. So we have to come up with from A to Z, the timeline. So how do you do that, right? You start with like dinner and, the wedding and then dinner, and then you build forwards and backwards. But how do you know how long things take? After a while, but what happens in the beginning?
Yeah.
Again, that's when I say revert to your experts. Go to your photographer and say, hey, how long does it take you to do this shot? How long does it take you to do that? Go to the hair and makeup experts. How long does it take you to do a bride's makeup? How long does it take you to do a bridesmaid's? And getting that information from the experts is what's going to lead you to being an expert.
Yeah.
Because you have to understand 8 to 10 to 12 different aspects, 12 different vendors, what they do in order to do what you do.
Right.
You can't just be a planner. I mean, you are obviously a planner, but you have to understand everybody that you're planning for.
So here's an important factor that a lot of people don't think about when they decide, I want to be a wedding planner. When you sign on to be a wedding planner, you are signing on to be a fractional team leader of people who have no accountability to you whatsoever.
Correct.
You're not part of their business. They have their idea of how to do things. You have yours. And showing up with knowledge helps you to show up with confidence, because otherwise the people that are in your team for that day, they don't trust you yet. You've not demonstrated that they will follow your lead when things start to go off track, or if you need to push things off, that they're going to buy into that. So, the amount of preparation that's involved in becoming proficient at this is way more than people really understand.
Yeah, it's a lot. It is a lot.
We say at Max Event, like, give yourself a little grace. You can only do what you can do every day. And if you're just taking actions every day to help advance your relationships, your knowledge, all of that, you're still going in the right direction, no matter if you're there in a year or 2 months. All right, so let's see. Let's get to talk about our clients now. So you're a wedding planner, and you're like, great, I have a meeting with somebody who's interested in my services, and you're gonna sit down with them. Could you tell me a little bit about what you think some important questions are that planner should ask their clients during that consultation?
So the first thing I ask them is, I start with something simple that makes them comfortable, so it gets them to talk. What's your theme? What's your vision? What are you looking for? So what are you looking to accomplish at the end of the day, right? And then the most important thing is, what is your budget? How much money have you allocated towards your wedding? I don't always say budget. I say budget when I'm speaking, but a lot of times when I'm talking to clients, I say, how much have you allocated? Because budget makes them feel like, oh, I don't have enough money.
Yeah.
So I say, how much have you allocated? And that is a really big factor, because when you get their theme and their vision, and now you're trying to set them up with vendors, and they give you a budget, you have to put the people that are in their tier and then match them up with their vision as well. But I think that we have to realize that a lot of times people will overshoot their budget all the time.
Or undershoot it?
Undershoot it, yeah. You do occasionally get that client that they'll tell you this is their budget, and then you give them a vendor, and then they put on 700 add-ons, and now they're double on their photographer, and you're like, okay. But the biggest thing is, get their vision, get their budget, and figure out what they want for the day, for the whole day. And a lot of times clients will come and say something such as, oh, this is my budget, right? But I want this tablescape. And you know that tablescape, that glass is costing $8, that fork is costing $6.
Yeah.
So now you've got to kind of bring them back, right? And so I asked them a lot, tell me about the last wedding you were at. Sit down, tell me what you saw. And they'll give me a descriptive. And I'm like, so you never saw the fork?
Yeah.
You have no idea what the linen looked like. I said, so so those things, if you have constraints, that's a way to show them too that you don't even remember those things. So let's not think about them.
Yeah.
Let's move past those and spend our money where it's more wisely.
Yeah. Well, brides are always going to want the Insta-worthy, Pinterest-worthy shot, right?
Yes,
but one of the jobs of the planner is to help them get back to the purpose of what they're doing here.
Right.
And it's true that there are some brides out there that the purpose is to have the most blingy wedding in the world.
Yes, they want to go viral.
Yeah.
Yes.
But others really, it's like down to like, this is our why, this is our reason, this is what we want from this experience. And as a planner, all planners need to decide, are they in it for the bling and the high profile, or are they in it for the purpose, right? And I love working with women in Max Event that are there for the purpose, right? And so, considering that a lot of people might be watching that within our community, I want you to know that, the questions that I love to ask couples are about like, tell me your story.
Right.
Tell me, how did you get engaged?
I always ask that.
Where
How
did
did you get engaged?
meet?
Yep.
Yeah. So this is how you as a planner can then infuse some magic. Like you paid attention to them when they talked. And then all of a sudden, you're, giving them some suggestions of something like, oh, I found this amazing little thing. And it just feels like, wow, she really gets us.
Right.
Okay. Because the other thing I want to highlight is that when you're brand new, you can't expect to know when somebody's showing you a picture how much that fork cost or how expensive those linens are. And I'm telling you, rentals are not inexpensive. So when somebody shows you the gold fork with the velvet linens and all of that, before you comment on how that's so beautiful and how, you could totally see that working with their $10,000 budget, just make sure that you have a solid foundation of knowledge before you're, you know.
And with that, when brides or grooms choose products that may be out of their range, the best thing you can do for them, the best service that you can do for them is to reach out to the experts in that field, whether it's a florist or somebody who has rentals, and say, hey, this is what my client's looking for, but I'm not sure it's in their budget. What are the alternatives?
Yeah.
Talk to me. Talk to me about, something that replaces a rose because it's not in season. Pampas grass, it's being, brought in from Mexico. Find something different, like help me. And lean on your vendors. And that, when you're doing that, that's another way you're building these strong relationships. Because then they know you're respecting their opinion. Yeah. That you're respecting them.
And not only respecting them, but they see you're putting some forethought in when you're saying, hey, they want this, but I don't know if that works. What can you suggest? As opposed to, okay, this is what my client, well, we can't get that at that time of year. It's going to be 4 times the cost. And then they're put in that sticky position. Yeah. So, you're help preserving that, that relationship all around. Okay, let's talk a little bit about venues. Okay, because venues are such a hot topic with couples. One of the most things I see on social media is, well, first of all, couples always ask for something reasonably priced. Yes. Right. And one thing to know as a planner is that you have to take reasonably priced with a grain of salt, because everybody's idea of reasonably priced is different. And I might come in and say, oh, it's, reasonably priced for you to get married at, the Botanic Gardens, and you're like, oh my God, that's like a year's salary for me, Right. Okay, so when you're looking for your venue, don't put your feelers out there on Facebook and say, what's a reasonably priced venue in this area? For me, and I would love to hear your perspective, but for me, it's more like I'm looking for a venue that can fit this many people, that has this kind of vibe, that is within this amount of distance from this location, that type of thing. What other things do you, use as your search criteria?
One of them obviously is budget. The other one is how many guests are you inviting? Because right there you start to eliminate a bunch of different venues.
Like the magic numbers around like 120.
Yeah, somewhere around there, 120, 150 we've been
Yeah.
getting. So we start with the budget, we start with how many people are you inviting, and then we start with what's your feel? Do you want something rustic? Do you want a grand ballroom? Do you want something coastal? And then I go back to how much input do you want with decor? Do you want a blank space, such as a tent, so that you can make it into your own? Or are you looking for the grand ballroom that you don't have to add a lot of touches to? And this is important because I had a client that we had the Botanical Center, which is a beautiful venue. It's a botanical center, it's gorgeous, and it fits 100 and let's just say 120 people. Knowing this going into it, they had enough people, but then they start putting in tables that take up space and can't fit that many people, and insisting that they're going to have them. So at one point we had to like punt, turn directions, and put a bump out tent to fit more people. But I remember distinctly telling this client, this is not a blank canvas. You have a strong desire to create a space, but we can't move trees.
Right.
We just can't do it. So those are very important if they want to have a huge impact on the decor or if they like the space they're in.
Right. Yeah. So that's a question for, the client on whether, are you comfortable finding a space that has the aesthetic and vibe that you're going for with some minimal tablescapes and things like that to bring your particular style into it? Or are you looking to define the style altogether? And of course, anytime you're trying to create something out of nothing, you're talking big dollars.
Yes.
Yeah. And as you alluded to, a common way people think to do that is we'll just set up a big tent in our backyard.
Yeah. That's
you see us here because we're like,
we'll just do a tent, and it'll cost so much less money, and it'll be so much easier. What they don't realize is that's like, you go to the grocery store and you buy some broccoli, right?
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. Putting a tent in your backyard is like planting the seed, digging the hole, planting the seed, and watching it grow.
Yeah.
It's not like getting a finished product.
No, you're creating a venue out of nothing.
Yes. Yep.
And then it's like peeling back the layers, and the more you peel, the more you realize. So an experienced planner knows right off the bat, okay, clients, you want tent, so these are some things we need to consider.
Right.
We need to consider heating, fans, bathrooms, a floor, sidewalls, catering tents, electricity, and generators. The generators make sound.
And is your ground level?
Yeah.
If your ground is not level, we can't get a tent because we can't have people like this, right? Unlevel ground, or does it need to be completely manicured before you do it? And I say that because I had a client pull up the sod 3 times. We had so much rain in Rhode Island. Pull it up and replace it 3 times prior to the wedding. It was crazy, and they were doing the backyard wedding because even though they didn't have a low budget. They had a very good budget, but they still thought it was going to cost a little less in the backyard. Not when you're.
No.
Yeah.
So that's just like myth number 1 of wedding planning. The tent wedding never is the least expensive option.
But the tent in itself is, tents are extremely expensive. They're hard to put up. They take a lot of labor. They take a lot of care. It's a huge expense.
And I mean, peeling back the layers, right? We want to have our ceremony under that beautiful tree over there. Well, what if it rains? Then your ceremony's going under the tent. How do you want to fit that in?
Yep.
Well, there are creative ways that experienced planners will know how to suggest that happen.
Right.
But I never suggest to a new planner to start off planning a tent wedding.
No, it is by far actually, that's one of my specialties.
Yeah.
I absolutely love estate weddings because I love having 100 factors go into an event and planning 100 factors. I absolutely love it. my ADHD brain thrives when there's, I don't want to call it chaos, but yeah, when there's 150 moving parts.
Right.
It is one of my favorite things to do because you just start off with this tiny seed, and at the end, well, I'm not going to say you have broccoli anymore, but you got a flower.
Right.
You've got something beautiful.
Tell us about a little about vendors now, because we're kind of in the planning phase here. They've decided, okay, we're going to hire you. What do we do first? Where do you start with your vendors?
So your big ticket vendors, the ones that will book faster than anybody else. They are your venue, and if you're having a tent wedding, they are your caterer.
Yeah.
Or they could be both, because your venue may not have an in-house catering company.
Yeah.
So those are the first two. Those are the two big ticket items that I find, again, because they can only do so many. A venue can't book 5 weddings in a day.
Right.
So those are the ones that will book up quickly.
Yep.
They only have so much capacity. But then I go into your entertainment and your photography, because those are areas where people have a certain desire of what they want.
Yep.
So there might be 5 pockets of entertainment, and this person only wants this. So again, those are the kind of things that'll book up early. Same thing with photographers. They can't do more than 1 wedding in a day.
Yeah.
So those are the 4 that I start with.
Right.
Yeah,
well, that makes sense. So, when you think of how many possible wedding vendors there could be, because there's a bar and a designer and maybe signage and all of the things, do you have some of, what are some of the ones that okay, I can wait until a little later, till a little closer to make sure that the theme of the wedding, that everything is sort of coming together before reaching out to?
So something like a photo booth. Those are the minute details.
Yep.
A photo booth can wait until later. Florists are very good at handling maybe 8 weddings in a day, right? Because they have bigger teams. So florals can sometimes wait too, because you don't know with the florals until you've got your tables and what you're putting in for tables and linens.
Yeah.
You have an idea of what you need, but you don't know, because now you're designing your space, right? So you may not know that, I'm going to have an arch, I'm going to have this. So florals can wait. Again, photo booths, florals, and signage.
Yeah.
Again, the small details, your welcome sign, your bar signs, your sign-in charts. And the reason I say those can wait is because there's honestly so many of them out there. They're underworked.
Yeah.
There's a few that have, a corner on the market,
Right.
but for the most part, and everybody has a Cricut.
Yep.
So those are things you can kind of wait on.
Yeah. Here's the other thing too, with people that are combating maybe budgetary considerations, there are things, they might not get that photo booth if they're decided, well, I really want to splurge on these particular flowers or photo package or whatever it is. So, for the sake of preserving the resources that you have available, start big and work your way through.
And I always tell them, the one place I tell them to never try to save money is a photographer.
Yeah.
When you eat your food, it's gone.
Yeah.
When you take down the tent, it's gone.
Yep.
Your photos will be there for the rest of your marriage.
Yes.
It is the one thing, even I disappear. Don't pick the budget photographer. Don't try to find a school that is teaching kids how to take photos. Find yourself a tried and true photographer.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that I just feel compelled to talk about too, because what you're saying is so important, where people are thinking about the day and how they want their day to be. But the day only lasts for a day, and then it's over. And your wedding is going to go by so fast, you're not even going to know what hit you. So when you're looking back and you chose a student photographer, and there's shadows behind everybody's face, or whatever, you will be in tears, and you will regret that decision. So if another $500 or $1,000 could have made the difference between this, it is worth it. It is so worth it. And the same can be said about something like the decision. I hear this one a lot. We're just going to play a playlist. We're not going to get a DJ. We're going to put on our music in Spotify, right? So, I mean, I'm sure you have stories.
Cringe. Yeah. I cringe when I hear that, because first of all, your playlist is what you like.
Yeah.
So that means you're going to participate in your dancing.
Right.
Let's see, what about the other 140
Yeah.
people? Do they like your music? Do they even
Right.
want to hear your music? Will they dance to your music? No.
Yeah.
And people just, well, not all people, some people just get up and dance, but not everybody just gets up and dances or
Yeah.
participates. DJs are essential. They are your MC. They don't play to your crowd. Like, you know what I mean? Like the crowd doesn't, they're not following your crowd,
Yeah.
is how I want to explain
Yeah.
it. The crowd is following them.
Yeah.
Whether you want to think about that or not, they are. And DJs won't even take playlists because they want to do what gets the crowd up
Right.
and moving and what's going to make people
Right.
have fun. So if you give a playlist, I mean, you know, and you're hardcore Snoop Dogg, even though I love Snoop Dogg, not everybody does, right?
I just think one of the other things that people don't often think about is it's not so much like, well, we can put on great music that people love and we know our crowd, but you don't know the flow of the
Right.
event until you're in the
Right.
event. And say you're just about to, like, you know, oh, we have to do the cake right now. And we're in the middle of a, you know, some whatever song that it's totally not the appropriate time. And then you're like cutting off the music instead of just giving that sign to somebody.
Right.
And then they know exactly
Right.
how to transition into what you're doing.
Yep.
So that's great, great information there. So how, you know, which vendors do you think it's most important to stay in pretty much constant contact within through your planning process?
Always the caterer, always the venue. They are the two things where things will change the most. Whether it's your count, your floor plan, your design, your decor, food restrictions.
Yeah.
Those are very, very important to keep in contact with them consistently. And then I always tell people again, the photographer.
Yeah.
The photographer is going to be with you and your bride all day long. You are going to be side by side. You're going to know that photographer more than you want to know that photographer by the end of the day
Yeah.
because you're going to have spent a lot of time together. So they need to know everything that's happening as it's happening. You know, you don't want a DJ announcing, hey, it's time for the parent dance, and number one, the photographer's missing,
Right.
or dad is not even
Right.
in the room, right? So, you know, and then with the food,
Yeah.
one of the most important things is when you're on that timeline, like when it's happening, I'm going to change that to the order of events because there's no such thing as a timeline.
Yeah.
People like to see that because they like to see the numbers, but it's
Yeah.
an order of events. Never
Yeah.
happens like that. But you need to be in constant contact at the day with your chef so that
Yeah.
the proteins don't get dropped before they, you know, they should be, so they're not coming out too soon.
Yeah. That's the worst thing is like you're at a wedding and the chicken is so dry, it feels like
Yeah.
it's been sitting there on
Yeah.
a hot plate for like an hour, and it probably has been if that's the case.
And that kind of goes back to what we first talked about, where I say work on the other end. Because if you don't work on the other end, you don't know about those things. You don't know
Yes.
what happens in the kitchen and how long something can
plating
sit before,
process,
right, how long they're on a
yeah.
plate for, how long it can sit before it's just not a good meal.
You can
you know?
even just like literally ask a catering company, can I just shadow? Can I come and just look at what happens
Yeah.
behind the scenes? Because it's so important to see how
It
that
is.
food
It
goes
is.
out for a 150, 200 person wedding.
Yeah.
One of the things that I like to do in my timelines, and sometimes I call it a run a show, you know, because it's like, you know, this is a production we're putting
Right.
together. I really get very detailed in my times when I give it out to my vendors. And I even talk to the clients about it, but I always preface it with, don't let this scare you. The reason why I plan my times down to almost like 10-minute increments is because when things start to go off track, then I know, okay, I can cut this out right here. We don't
Right.
have to do this. Or, you know, it just helps to like figure out how many minutes we have to make up for very quickly.
Right.
But I tell them, look, and I think you would say the same thing, no matter what, something's going to go wrong. It always does. And it's the manner in which you handle it
Right.
that makes the difference. So let me give you a scenario, Charlene. Say we're at a wedding and the caterer is right about to start plating the food up and it's like a full service plated meal. But all of a sudden, it's the bride is missing in the bathroom somewhere, or we don't know what's going on, but
Yep.
they're not. What do you do? What do you do?
Oh, my first thing is to go to the caterer.
Yeah.
Listen, put a hold. I don't know where my bride is at the moment. Give me a minute, put a hold. And so the first thing you do is tell the chef right away.
Yeah.
Tell
So,
the chef.
so let me stop you right there, because a lot of people would say, I have to find that bride right away. No, 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 no. The bride needs to be wherever she
Yep.
is at that
Yep.
moment. You need to make sure the show is going to
Exactly.
go off.
So you
Yeah.
take a peek at what's on your timeline and what's happening. Even though your bride may be missing, you just let the vendors know. And again, the vendors are going to be your best friends. They're your team, but you've always got to keep them alert as to what's happening in that timeline.
Right, right.
And what I try to tell brides too and grooms is that, we create this timeline, we create this plan, right? Your guests have no idea, okay? And the example I use, because it's never happened, is that if you plan to have a dance floor and it got up and walked away before your guests came in the tent, they had no idea you had
Right.
one. So it's okay. Nobody knows what we planned except for you. So they don't know if there's a mishap. And again, let's call it you call it a run of the show. I call it an order of events.
Yeah.
Because timeline makes people think that it's going to happen at a certain
Or
time.
that if it doesn't, it's a
It's
stressful
a mistake,
thing.
right?
Yeah,
And it's not.
Yeah, for
It's
sure.
not. I always tell people, it's not happening when I say in this little block here. It's not happening at 9:10.
Yeah.
If there's one person that's a minute behind, now all 30 people are a minute behind, so we're 30 minutes behind.
Right, right.
But it's
Hey,
okay.
You know what the key is to maintain composure.
Yep.
And you present yourself always with a calm demeanor, a
Yes.
smile, and you're the epitome of confidence, moving through, handling everything. You could in your head be like, oh, what am I going to do now? But you're just
Right.
smiling and moving through, and everybody is just like feeling calm
Right.
and like it's fine because you're not overreacting. You're not running around like you're a crazy person.
And mistakes happen. We
Yeah.
had a groom, the groomsmen, they forgot all of the boutonnieres.
Oh no.
Okay, we get them into and so they're on site, and the limo goes with their boutonnieres. Bride is in a panic, and her dad had his boutonniere, so she had just done her first look. So I took the boutonniere off her dad, and I said, "No, this is perfect. We're going to put this on your husband to be." I said, "And just as when your father is transitioning you to your husband," I said, "it's kind of like a symbol here." I said, "Now your dad had this boutonniere, and now he's putting it on your husband." So, yeah, you have to remain calm because, but how important are boutonnieres? I mean, I guess they're important. They are. They're nice. But again, it was a moment where the bride was panicking, but I was like, nope, here's what we're going to do, and this is how we're going to do it, and it's going to be a sentimental thing that you're going to remember
Yeah.
forever.
And that's like a master move right there, because you switched that instantly around
Yeah.
to make it meaningful.
Yes.
And that's all these couples want on their
Yeah.
day, is to know that everything is happening, that there's purpose and meaning behind it. And yes, for sure, sometimes the meaning was, we put so much money into this, blah, 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 whatever it is. But really, they're getting married, and,
Yeah.
and the planning is done now. So it just has to move forward.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about more about problem solving, because we talked a lot about, kind of like trial under fire and going with the flow and all that. So do you have any strategies that you use for during the planning process, managing your clients' expectations when it comes to budgeting? Because I know you work with some people that maybe not have, tight budgets, but some people do.
Well,
Yeah.
even people that don't have tight budgets still have their expectations of what they want to spend on something. So I think the first thing you need to understand is the cost of whatever products that you're using, the cost of rentals, the cost of florals, the cost of transportation. That's a big one that I have to explain to clients a lot. And you need to explain that to them. And when I say like cost of like transportation, well, I only want the limo for like, 2 hours. Why am I being charged, for a full day? And then I have to explain to them, well, we take the limo out of service. It cannot be used again for the whole day, even though you're only using it for 2 hours. They've got to clean it. They've got to hire somebody to drive to you, bring you where you have to go, then clean it again. So, having the client understand costs is a big to-do. And then knowing things like they'll pick florals that are maybe out of season.
Yeah.
Again, lean on your florist, find an alternative, and explain to the, a bride or a groom again that, this is not in season, this costs more, so let's talk about alternatives.
Yeah, and I think it's important here to realize that when we have that client relationship, they hired us because we're the expert at this, and so you have to stand by your expertise. No matter if you're still learning, you still know something, or you can get the information. And presenting alternatives that are something that is like maybe more in line with their budget, or coming to the table with some ideas. What I don't think people should do is just because some clients can be difficult. Let's just say it.
They can be.
So we have to know when to stand our ground, and we're going to get into the boundaries conversation in a minute. But it starts with knowing when to stand your ground and being able to calmly explain to your clients, what is the implication of making that decision? Because it's not often just like a yes or no. If it's this, then it can affect this, and it's a ripple effect.
Yes.
So it's important because we're the experts that are in charge of making sure that the thing runs smoothly. So when we're saying yes to things that are not easy to run smoothly, then we're in a bad position.
Right, and I do, when brides are insistent on something, a lot of times I do refer back to, in my expert opinion. And if they're adamant, sometimes you have to give them their way, and sometimes you can talk them out of it, but you just need to make sure that you've shown them or told them what are the implications of you doing this, and you are strongly suggesting they do not do it. And then I say, put that in writing. Put that into an email that you suggest they don't take this route. And if they do, you tell them what's going to happen, but keep it in writing. So when they come back and say, you didn't tell me, you're like, no, I did.
And that's really going to lead us into the chat about boundaries. Because, people are very focused on what their goals and objectives are for their event. They are losing track of the fact that you have 35 other weddings for the year that you're managing, and you can't take their calls at midnight or 7 a.m. or whatever it is. So before we wrap up our conversation, I think it's so vital to talk about what are ways that new planners, especially new planners who don't have that strength behind them yet, what are some ways they can make sure their boundaries are honored, and what type of boundaries do they really need to protect?
So first I'll tell you that when I started, I had no idea how to have boundaries. I was just in the field, so anytime a bride called, I talked, and it was a hot mess. I was a hot mess because they monopolized all of my time, and suddenly the job that you love is just a ball of stress. And you no longer you don't even have any life, right? So very quickly, without setting boundaries, you can lose your whole life. You lose your whole social life, you lose everything. So I suggest always contracts. Start with contracts. Whatever I discuss in an initial conversation with a bride and a groom, or a bride and a bride, a groom and a groom, whatever I discuss with a couple, I go back in an email and put everything, bullet points in an email. And then when I send them the proposal and the contract, I also list everything. And to me, sometimes it seems a little, it may seem a little much. But this way, when they read the contract, we both, first of all, understand what our expectations are. If I've missed something, they can come back and tell me. Because, you can misunderstand what somebody's saying and maybe put it down incorrectly. But with the contract, they have it. I make them initial certain things, not just sign at the bottom. There's certain things I want to make sure they read them, which is the duties, which is the costs associated with everything, which any fees that are involved, if they have to spend, I have to stay overnight. I make sure they initial those things so they can't come back and say, I didn't see that. you initialed it, right?
Yeah.
So, and I talk about it with them. The other thing is your time.
Right.
You know, my time says I'm there from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. But that's because I understand you can't plan during lunchtime, right? So nobody can talk to me then. So I let them talk to me in the morning and then talk to me at night. And the daytime, that's when I'm doing other things. Sometimes I'm at the gym, or sometimes I'm working on a timeline. But, you know, I give them the time when they are not working to contact me.
Right.
And I make a hard stop at that 8 o'clock. I take my last appointment at 7. And if I'm wrapping up with the client in their initial consultation at 7 o'clock, and we're done at like 7:45, you know, the next part for me is to get them the proposal and the invoice. And I say to them, well, I have an 8 o'clock curfew, so if you don't mind, I'm going to do this in the morning. They've already spoken to me, so I'm not, you know, I'm not missing out on that client, right? And I'll start again in the morning. But you really need to set the boundaries, and then with some clients, you literally have to say, okay, we're going to do this many phone calls. Our phone calls are only so long. And what I've done now is I have it on mine. So when they book with me, they book a slot, but I've chosen how long those conversations will last.
Right.
So they're already predisposed.
Yep.
You know, an initial consult, 45 minutes, you get that. A review, you're getting 30 minutes. The timeline, we're 45 minutes. So I block it out, and they know.
Yeah.
And if you're doing a Zoom, it shuts off on you.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think that one of the things to remember for people starting on this journey is that, you know, don't get overwhelmed with, you know, all of the tips, all of the tricks, all of everything, right? Because, you know, although these things to hear about are so important in their journey, it's stuff that will come to the top naturally. Sometimes you have to make the mistake of letting people contact you at 10 p.m. at night.
To know why you don't want it.
Until you're like, well, I'm going to get a Google Voice number and turn it off at 8 o'clock and not answer that or whatever.
Right.
But sometimes you have to know what is the consequence of not doing something before you understand why you have to stand behind what it is that you know.
And then the other part of it is, you know, if you're their full planner, then you're their confidant. You are, okay? And we take on that role and we know it, but you still got to give them time. But if I'm your day of coordinator, I can't walk you through every piece of planning that you didn't plan properly. I will check on it, I'll check it off, I make notes, and now I give you back that contract to look at, but I don't take on that job as the planner. And that took me a moment to get with too, because I wanted it to be right. But now what I do is I give them that, I tell them what they need to do, I write it down, and I give it to them to do it. And I let them know at the end of an email, if you'd like me to help, we can work on, you know, consultation fee.
Right.
If you want me to take care of this problem.
Yep.
You know, if not, you'll give everything away for free, and you're the day of coordinator, and next thing you know, you've partially planned their wedding.
Yeah, it's so important to value your time appropriately. So important. We didn't even get a lot into pricing and all of that. We could talk all day, really. No, that's
I know.
That's good.
I
mean, there's just so much. It's just like, I think it underscores the fact that it's such a big job.
It is.
And there is a lot to know.
You know, when I first started doing this, there was nothing. You learned on the job, which is, I think, the best thing ever, because that's when mistakes happen and you have to learn how to, you know, react and how not to react and how to problem solve on the spot. Everything you do is on the spot. Like, you don't have a choice. There's no resources other than what's in your brain to think it up. And then I see these college courses in it, and I think, you know, that's great. That's wonderful. It's a college course. A college course doesn't tell you how to react to a fire.
Right.
It does not tell you how to put it out, or it doesn't tell you if you can.
Yeah.
You don't know that you can react to a situation until you're there.
Yep.
I mean, I've stitched up people's feet. I had a Jewish wedding where they broke through the slipper, and I had to, you know, give you some butterfly stitches. I would not recommend that nowadays, though. But, you know, you just don't know how you're going to react, or if you can. until it happens.
It's so true.
You know.
I would love for you to tell anybody watching if they want to get in touch with you to learn more from you or to hire you. What is your website?
It's Just a Girl Events, and it's www.justagirlevents.com.
Perfect.
So, I mean, we have a website, we have Instagram, we have Facebook. I have TikTok, and I have to say, I think I'm getting pretty good at TikTok videos.
Better you than me.
I'm having a lot of fun with it, you know, and the thing is, even though weddings are my thing, I love weddings, that's the majority of my work, you know, I am an event planner. I'm not just a wedding planner.
Yeah.
You know, a few years ago, we did an Emmy nomination party. We
Wow.
did Judge Caprio.
Oh.
Actually, I've done many of his events where I've done his family as well, but, you know, we had 1,000 people Emmy nomination party. It was really a lot of fun. So it's not just weddings. We do all types of events.
Yeah.
And, you know, we also come in and do partial planning. We do a lot of day of coordination because people are planning themselves, which our day of, I never recommend anybody coming in for one day. I offer a 6 to 8 week day of,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
But we can do as
Month
little,
of, yeah.
as little as much as you want. And in the process, when I was doing, you know, maybe destination weddings or weddings, I realized that now I'm planning honeymoons, so I'm also a licensed travel agent.
There you go.
So we do honeymoons, and we offer that with our servers at no fee.
Are you an efficient yet?
No, because I have to be sending my bride out the door, so I can't be in the front. I have to make sure her gown is good to go. Yeah. So I don't think I could do both unless I ran in front of her. No, it wouldn't work.
Well, I've loved talking with you so much
Yes,
about
thank
this,
you.
and I hope we get to do this again because I still feel like there's so much we didn't get to.
There's a lot to it, yeah.
There's a lot, but thank you so much for joining me
Yes.
today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
I had a great time. It was wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
And I'm Melissa Cossette from Max Event, and if you want to hear more from me, you can go to maxeventconsulting.com or find me on social media at Max Event Official, and we'll see you next time on Eventful Insights.